Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Streamline Capital. Very excited for today's show. We've got none other than Kevin Bupp. And Kevin, before I turn the mic over to you, I'll just say that his podcast was one that, really influenced me, 6 years ago when I was jumping into multifamily. So Kevin, first of all, thanks for running that podcast so long ago and welcome to the show.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate the kind words and I'm excited to be here with you.
Awesome. So let's talk about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into real estate investing.
Yeah, sure thing. I always joke and say that, real estate found me. I didn't really find it. So it just it found me at a very unique, pivotal moment of my life where I was, didn't have a North Star that I was chasing. I was 19 years old, going to community college and tending bar in the evenings, trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. But having fun, making money while I was at it. But again, just kind of going to school with no real direction of why I was there, what I wanted to learn, and where I wanted to apply my efforts. And so I started dating a girl at the age of 19. Her mother had recently been divorced. Her mother started dating a gentleman by the name of David. David happened to be a local real estate investor. So that really was the basis of it all. And, through days of being over there and weeks of being over there and seeing him and talking to him and getting to know him, it ultimately became, we formed a friendship. And from that friendship came an opportunity. Basically, the opportunity was within a few months of knowing him, he invited me to a conference down in Philadelphia, a real estate investing conference put on by a gentleman by the name of Ron LeGrand. He's still around today, I think. Old soul out there teaching, how to fix and flip and, create a rental portfolio. And so that was really the start of it, really, with that conference. And at that point in time was when I identified what that North Star was going to be. It was the only time I've ever felt super excited about what the future held as far as like, what am I going to do? I got friends going to college. I didn't feel productive going to community college. I just didn't feel like it was going to amount to anything. Surely that wasn't the right attitude, but I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know what would help me, just do bigger things. I wanted more. I grew up in a great family, but we never had excess. We had plenty, but not excess, just always had a job at young ages, had a paper out at the age of 12, used to shovel snow, learn how to install, stereo systems. And my brother had an older brother and him and his friends' cars in my dad's garage. And so like all these things, I was just trying to make money because I wanted to buy my own things. But I still hadn't identified what that was going to mean as an adult. But real estate was it. It became it at the age of 19. And I essentially came back from that conference, Brian. I knew that if I didn't take action or do something, that excitement I had would just fizzle away, and I'd go back into the normal routine. And so I made David an offer he couldn't refuse. And he was a solopreneur. He was about 25 years older than I. Really successful, but just like an individual kind of hustler, kind of did everything himself to a certain degree, and found great success in it. But surely there were some inefficiencies in what he did. And so I basically made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I said, let me come work for you for free and help you in areas that I believe I could help, whether that be running errands for you, picking up supplies, dropping them off at a property, dropping off leases, picking up leases, returning phone calls, filtering phone calls, whatever it meant. I was there to lend a hand, and he accepted the offer. And that was really the kickoff of it. And I worked for him for over a year in between classes and tending bar in the evenings. I was either with him in his home office or out in the field somewhere. I was by his side trying to learn the business really through osmosis, just literally trying to be around it and absorb as much as I could. And that's when it all started, man. I bought that first property then at the age of 20 after spending about 14 months working with David directly. And then that first property turned into, within about 4.5 years, turned into 120 single family homes in a fairly short period of time. And then ultimately a few hundred apartment doors. And then through the years thereafter that, leading up to '08, started dabbling in commercial real estate, owned just about every type, office, residential, some industrial, some self-storage. And then, that was really the first phase. I call that that was my first phase of my journey.
Yeah, you said leading up to '08.
'08, leading up to '08, and then a big boom, right?
Yeah. So how did you weather that big storm?
I didn't. I didn't. The hell came down and bopped me in the head a bunch of times, right? I look back and, surely many other folks way smarter than I that had been through other cycles also felt the brunt and the impact. Many people around me who ultimately were advisors and people, again, that had, many decades of experience also were feeling the pain, and many have lost all their fortunes, right? So I was no different. It was the first down cycle I had ever experienced, and it happened so darn quickly that it was just reactionary the entire time. Could never figure out how to get out in front of it. And ultimately it just spiraled down until really it was now just a matter of mitigating the damage as much as possible, damage control, and just working through judgments and conversations with lenders and banks, which in the beginning they didn't want to hear. That was the biggest challenge, is like what's changed, what's different today than what it was back then is back then the banks were not prepared for that downfall. And a lot of them just put their head in the sand for a period of time until they realized how bad it was going to get and that it was only going to get worse before it got better. But in that first, like, call it 8 to 12 months, there wasn't a lot of open conversations of, hey, we want to work with you. We want to, let's do some workouts. Let's help you maintain, these properties and these loans and give you some leeway so that we ultimately don't end up with all these things back on our books. And so that period of time is what really sunk me. Not only did we have challenges with paying the debt, we had lots of our tenants that lots of folks in Florida moved out of state. A lot of jobs were built around construction. Construction came to a screeching halt. Lots of jobs revolved around real estate. That all came to a screeching halt. And you kind of had this exodus. But on top of that, you had a lot of excess supply that had been built for a population that wasn't even yet here. And so it was just a weird dilemma. And ultimately just lost everything, including primary residence, had bank accounts garnished. It was a pretty trying time. And it lasted, I mean, really, it was a couple of years to kind of sort through it. And even many years thereafter to really clean up all the mess, but really like a concentrated 2.5 years or so of just battle every day, to get through it. So
now you mentioned lenders and banks. Did you have a lot of investors at this point as well?
Yeah. So what we would typically do, and this is again this is kind of like single family days, and we had never formally done like a capital raise that we did today. We weren't syndicators. Kind of got my start in single family stuff. So everything I knew was private debt loans from private investors, high net worth individuals, lots with like self-directed IRAs. So what we would do is we typically go buy, a number of single family homes, maybe a couple a month, and then wait until we acquired, buy them with the private money, fund the repairs with private money, get them renovated, and then once we had a batch of 4 or 5, 6, sometimes more than that, but that was kind of like the normal number. Then we go get a commercial loan, commercial recourse loan on that batch, do a cash out refinance, give our lenders their money back. And so we had a few properties, I guess you could say, kind of in that transitionary period. But again, working with a private lender to kind of sort through the mess, like, hey, like we want to make this right. We want to work through this. We're not just going to like leave you holding the bag. And so we were able to work out everything with any of those individuals that we had loans with that were kind of in that transitionary stage. It was the banks that were the problem. Like there was no conversations to be had, not until it was too late. And then once it was too late, it was kind of like, I wish we'd have had this conversation 10 months ago, because now we're in a world of hurt and we can't pay down debt. Or we can't do this. We can't work the option that you're offering us right now. It's not feasible. And so,
yeah, I think the lenders have definitely learned from that. I mean,
yes.
COVID, lenders came out and said, hey, we're going to work with owners. And then with this last downturn, I know a lot of people are restructuring debt, and lenders, I think, like I said, they've learned from that. There are a lot of banks that failed in 2008, 2009 timeframe because of the lending. And I think right now they're looking at what's worse, for us to negotiate on a loan and take a small hit, or for us to be rigid and take a big hit later. And I think
Right.
that's very fortunate for people right now anyways. So you said you lost a lot, even your personal residence as well. I mean, that must have been tough. What got you going again, or did you just never really stop? I mean, how did that transition out of that crisis happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did stop pursuing new real estate opportunities for a couple of years because again, it was just I was kind of stuck in the mix of it all. But what I did is, the one thing I felt like I could control my life. The only thing I felt like I could control was like how my health and all that. So I really went on like this health and fitness journey, and how I looked at it was like, if I wake up feeling good every day and like a good, physical and mental state, then like, well, there's going to be like lots of challenges that get thrown at me that day. I can definitely handle them better in being perfect shape than I could just being a slob, drinking all the time and eating like crap and feeling like crap in the morning. Right. And so I went on that journey, and then ultimately what that parlayed into, and this was kind of like an interim period. I ended up starting 2 other businesses that I would say they kept the lights on, right? I wouldn't say they absolutely killed it, but I want to have fun. I want to start a business that's aligned with health and fitness, but also gets my mind off of like all this other stuff I'm dealing with. So one was got into running, quite big, triathlons and all that kind of stuff. And one was a custom clothing company where we basically outfitted, cyclists and marathoners with custom dry fit performance gear. And then the other one was a social running club that ultimately turned from one location where bars would basically pay to come on the slow nights. And it turned into, we ended up having like 40 locations after a number of years in multiple different states, where basically we get paid to bring runners there in the slow nights. And then, we get kickbacks from what was spent there at the bar. But I mean, again, neither one of those were multi-million-dollar business, but they were fun. I met a lot of people. I got to just continue on my health and fitness journey and literally make money while I was doing that. And again, it just kept my focus off of some of this other bad stuff that was happening. But but it did it long enough to where, number one, I was happy that I, was able to just, again, keep the lights on and again, feel good about everything. But number two, I got to the point where I realized like, these are great. This is fun. But like, this doesn't give me the fire that I had felt with real estate. Like it just like that fire. I never really got that back. And so I started really looking at that point, 2010 ish, early 2011, really started diving back in, but more so like exploratory mission, find out the landscape had changed. I hadn't really been looking at opportunities. I hadn't been, I hadn't gone down the road of talking about new debt or, what does lending look like? I knew it was completely different, but I just didn't know what I didn't know at that point because I had kind of taken 3 years away. And so that was the start of it. And that's how I accidentally ran across the mobile home park space, back in 2011. And yeah, accidentally. It was one of the asset classes I'd never considered. I mean, again, I've kind of owned just about everything. Like there's like a hodgepodge of stuff. You drive past mobile home parks, depending where you live here in Florida, there's a lot of them, right? Yeah. I'd never known anybody that owned one. I'd never heard it talked about. And so I just never gave it any further consideration. It wasn't like that sexy asset class. It wasn't cool like a retail storefront or an apartment complex or anything like that. And so I happened to meet a guy by the name of Randy on this exploratory mission. I was introduced to him by a mutual friend, and he had been a banker for a commercial banker for a number of decades. And ultimately, in his last 10 years, he started lending on parks. He had a number of clients that had mobile home parks. And what he said to me is like, I realized in the last couple of years before I retired that I had been on the wrong side of that P&L. I'd been on the wrong side of that transaction, and that my clients were making a ton of money in this, manufactured housing or mobile home park niche. And when he retired, he went and bought 3 parks here in Florida as his retirement. And that's when I met him. And so he got me so excited about this asset class and told me why it was like the best thing since sliced bread. And that literally sent me on a new journey. That's where I literally went and I learned as much as I could, which was really difficult, but bought the first park back in 2012, and fast forward today, we've owned them 18 states and own thousands of units now at present time, and it's been a fun ride. So
awesome. So what initially attracted you? I mean, you said before the crash, you'd done single family, multifamily, some other commercial assets. What really attracted you to mobile home parks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say that when I was looking to kind of go through, go to phase 2, start phase 2 and rebuild, I had thought, I was like, it's going to be multifamily. Like, just like I wasn't married. Ended up getting married in 2010. And prior to that, like, I was building a single family home portfolio. I put a lot of work into, buying 120 homes. It was a lot of energy to do it. Very inefficient when you look back at it, but I wasn't married. I was single. It was fun. I was, hustling and like, that's what I did. Right. But then I realized that it was just a much easier way to do it. Multifamily was a much more efficient way to, to scale, number of doors and just create a more sustainable business, right? One that could support some employees, staff, things like that. And one that can help you at some point get out of the business, right? Actually, just get a, you'll play from a higher executive level role. That's where I thought I was going. And so, Randy basically was like, look, I love multifamily as well. I got a lot of clients that made a lot of money doing it, this, that, and the other. But he's like, man, mobile home parks are kind of unique in that he's like, number one, the residents are really sticky. They own their homes and they don't leave all that often. And when they do, they typically just sell their home. Just like you would a single family home, it doesn't leave the park and it very rarely ever gets pulled out of the park. And so your lot rent continually comes in, even when they might have moved and have their home up for sale. And that was attractive to me, just lower turnover, obviously lower make ready costs because you don't own the home. So you're not turning units, lower management responsibility, generally speaking. That's not always 100% the case, but as far as like staffing and things like that, it is. As far as like, we can run a 800 space mobile home community. We've got 2 full-time managers and an assistant manager and a salesperson, but like, that's a huge community and that basically runs it, and like 2 groundskeepers, right? That runs the entirety of that, which I think an apartment probably be a little bit more than that, I would think.
Oh, a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big one. There was a lot of levers that could be pulled. A lot of these mobile home parks, and that's changing today. Like the industry has been consolidated quite a bit. Back when we got into it, there was no institutional capital into it at all. Again, it wasn't attractive to Wall Street for whatever reason. That changed over the years, but back then it was mostly just like first generation or second generation owners. A lot of the original owners that built these things back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And so what I found is that it was very much a mom and pop owned and operated business. And, what comes from those is that while they might be great communities run well, they're not run as efficiently maybe as what they could be. On top of that, they're not great they don't keep up with market rents. They don't have a good systems in place to do market studies on an annual basis. They also might be
Most mom
having,
and pops don't, which is really great as a
yeah,
buyer. So yeah.
that's right. That's right. They've got, heavier than average expense load. We can go in and pull a number of levers fairly quickly and improve upon the bottom line. But, we also found a lot of mom and pops they would run these like their ATMs, and they would basically build their life around the income, but they would very rarely ever put a lot of money back in. And so these things, and over time, become tired. Roads, major infrastructure upgrades that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They just have the money to do it. And so it slowly degrades over time, right? It's like this downward spiral. But therein lies the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's obviously similar in multifamily. If you can get the mom and pop ownership. One thing I was thinking recently, we just started redoing asphalt at one of our apartment complexes, and the previous owners, multiple, hadn't been taking care of it, and we're dumping, 120, $130,000 into asphalt. And what I was thinking is, how much would it have cost to reseal these things every 3 to 5 years, versus the replacement cost? But yeah, I think that's the case of a lot of mom and pop owners. Don't put money back in, and eventually somebody has to, bite the bullet and just put a ton of money into it. So seeing that has helped me be a better operator. Now I don't mind paying the, $5, $8, $10,000 to reseal asphalt every couple of years. But anyway, lots of benefits there. You said you bought your first one in 2012. Let's talk about how you progressed and some of the big challenges you had progressing and scaling.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the initial ones were just lack of capital. I mean, when we bought our first one, I mean, I literally scratched together just a little bit of money. I had no credit at that point. I stopped checking credit. I didn't even try to get bank loans. I couldn't get anything, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a big challenge there. But the bigger challenge was getting financed. Actually, finding banks that understood the business model and that would actually lend us money. It's interesting because now it's quite the opposite. There are a ton of local, regional, national banks that are in the space. Agency lenders, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, both are very active and aggressive in the space. That was not the case when we first got started. And so getting financed was tough, but it was kind of a double-edged sword because ultimately what the benefit that sometimes will come out of it is that, we'd go bang our heads against a wall, 30 banks. And if all 30 of them said no, and the seller still wanted to do the deal, a lot of times that allowed us to negotiate owner financing or seller financing. So that was one of the benefits. But sometimes we couldn't do the deal. We had deals that lost. We lost them because the seller didn't want to finance it, and we literally couldn't get financing. It was a phenomenal deal, but that was tough. I felt we put a lot of work into growing and just building a portfolio because we just every time it was like pick up the phone and got to find it's just myself, my partner, like trying to do all this by ourselves, right? Like trying to run all the aspects of the business and then also act as like a capital markets guy and literally be talking to a million bankers, dog and pony show, that whole thing. And so that was tough. That was very tough, and it really didn't get a lot easier probably until, gosh, I would say in like 2016 or 17, I would say lending opened up a good bit, not a lot, but a good bit to where there's definitely other people that were starting to understand the opportunity that existed, from a lending perspective. So,
but the terms were never comparable to multifamily.
No, they have been now for, I would say I don't know the exact year that Fannie and Freddie really got aggressive in the space, but 85% of the loans we do today are agency loans, and they're equally as aggressive or I guess are favorable as they would be to multifamily. In fact, it's almost the same matrix that they price it by. So, so we have the same options today that exist to multifamily, but that surely was not the case back then. The first type of loan that really expanded the opportunities for us when we were kind of a couple years into this, where CMBS lenders kind of got into the space. So now there was a non-recourse option, right? Now there was an option with a 30-year amortization, a couple years maybe of interest only, and that was huge. I mean, that made some deals work and just, that ultimately wouldn't have worked otherwise. Or maybe it would have just been a little too tight we got 150 bips difference in pricing from a CMBS loan to a regional bank, right? And a 20-year AM to a 30-year AM, right? Like that was like the making or breaking of a lot of deals. And so CMBS was like a bright, fresh light that came into our space, and then agency really got aggressive. And so like now it's very comparable. Like the loan options are very comparable to that of multifamily.
Awesome. So up front, I mean, you said you relied a lot on owner financing. You relied when you couldn't get bank loans. And I know you have, funds right now where you're actively raising capital. When did you start the capital raise model?
2014 is when we formally launched Sunrise Capital Investors. That's also when we formally launched our very first fund. And, prior to that, it was like my own money and then friends and family, some prior relationships, just kind of like close to the vest. And it was really hey, let's prove this concept out. Let's use our own money, risk our own immediate capital before we look to raise any capital. And So that took a couple of years of us just buying a number of deals on our own and just kind of working through the mess, right? Understanding the business and what it consisted of, where the risks lie, and just how to do it completely right before we went, asking for money from other folks. And so 2014 was that day. And we originally had considered going just like a individual syndication route, like deal by deal, deal specific, which is quite common. And what we realized is that like our deal size is so much smaller on average than that of your typical multifamily deals. And we had a lot of folks that want to give us money, and the pipeline was full. We had 3, 4, 5 deals in any given time, and they're all 500,000 to maybe $1.5 million size deals. There's a lot of small stuff. We're like, gosh, like just the legal expenses and the mechanics with doing 5 individual deal specific syndications, like
It's almost not worth
it's
it.
silly. It's not worth it. Yeah, it's not worth it. So how about we just
Like
let's put out
$20,000.
let's
Yeah.
put a fund out there and let's see what the adoption looks like. And the sales pitches, diversification across multiple different markets, across multiple different assets, and it was a hit. We got a lot of takers, and that model has proven to be very successful for us and our investors over the years. So that's all we've ever done. We just launched our 4th fund last October. It's been a fun ride, but the fund model has worked great for us. It's worked great for our investors, and again, just allowed us to be a little bit more efficient. Just given the average deal size. Now our deal sizes change over the years. I mean, our average deal size today is about $12 million. And we've had many transactions that are, $30 and $40 million individual transactions. So definitely a lot higher today than what they were back then, but still there's a lot of power with the fund model. There's just a lot of buying. There's a lot of buying opportunities, a lot of buying power. There's many times where we would have lost out in the deal. We came in, closed it all cash quickly while simultaneously working on financing, but didn't have to get it done before the deal closed, and was able to be awarded the deal for that reason alone. So definitely lots of power behind, the leverage behind having a fund in place.
Yeah, I love the fund model. What I've seen on the multifamily side is, if people don't have a significant enough track record and history, it's hard for them to launch the fund and get it funded for the first go round. That's what I found. But so hence I have not launched a fund yet. I'm still doing deal by deal.
There's not a right or wrong. You're right, but like again, I agree with that. Obviously we had some track record, and then again our first fund, literally we raised, I think it was $6 million or something like that, and then the second fund was I think 15 million, and then our third fund was much more significant in size. I think we ended up bringing about 70 million of equity, and then at present time we've got about 57 million of equity that we've raised in our most recent fund, and so we've grown significantly over time. But like that, I think if we'd have gone out and tried to like rail the gate, say, hey, we're rolling out a $50 million fund, like we'd had some money come in, but I don't think that we would have allocated 100% of it.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think, one thing I didn't realize, that you mentioned, when you're doing deals that are under $1 million, it doesn't make sense to do a, $200,000 raise with a $20,000 attorney fee or whatever. So it seems like with the size of properties and just the asset type in general, it almost, I'm not going to say forced, but it incentivized you to go that direction anyway. And I think
that's right.
Yeah. So I'm just comparing the two, multifamily to mobile home parks in my head right now. But so first one was about 6 million. Now, when you raise the funds, do you typically have like a large balance sitting waiting to be deployed?
Yeah, that's a great question. But that is the typical institutional way. They'll go out, they'll say, hey, we're launching a $250 million fund. They'll get all those funds allocated, and then they'll go to work, identifying the opportunities and looking to deploy that capital. We have found that that's really counterintuitive to finding the best deals. And so we coined our own terminology, but it's really like it's a rolling fund. And so, we'll say, hey, if this is going to be a $100 million fund or whatever, you name the number, $100 million fund, more than likely I'll end up with, somewhere between 13 to 15 properties in it over the next 2 years. Normally I have at least one, if not 2 or 3 seed properties that we've already been negotiating before we roll out the newest fund. They'll know what those are going to be. There'll be actual deals that we start bringing capital in for that we can truly put to work in a fairly quick manner. But then after that point in time, it becomes, if you looked at kind of the capital raise trajectory over a period of one of our funds, it ends up being a roller coaster. Because what we do is every time we bring a new deal in, if we have a new opportunity, we really put like the marketing engine behind it for a concentrated period of time, and really just say basically like any new capital that comes in, we're going to be able to put to work very quickly in this new opportunity. And we kind of do individual like marketing pushes behind each one of the respective deals that's going to end up in the fund. And so again, the capital is always coming in, but it basically, it goes up and then it comes, new opportunity goes back down and up again. So, but we always have, there's always some capital in there that maybe isn't allocated for a period of maybe it's, 4 to 6 weeks. So there's always some that something comes up and like, again, we got to maybe close on a little cash or something along those lines that we can actually act upon it. But we don't have just like 50 million bucks sitting there,
Yeah.
and then we have to go hunt deals. And we found that, again, it makes us, I think
Yeah.
it makes anybody a more responsible investor, right? Like, we've really got to speak to individual deals. We're not just like, hey, don't give us a checkbook with, 100 million bucks
Yeah.
in it and let us go spend it how we see fit.
I think it's more efficient use of capital too, because
Yeah,
debt capital. I mean, it's going to be sitting in an account, and in an account where you're not going to lose money, so you're not going to get a ton of interest. But yeah, I mean, if you can deploy it and start making more money, I mean, you're making more money. There
that's
you go.
right. That's right.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, so fast forward to today. What type of properties are you looking for? You mentioned 18 states. Is there a couple of areas that you really have your eye on right now?
Yeah, I mean, so we launched our fourth fund last October, SEI Growth and Income Fund 4. We've since acquired 5 assets in it, all 5 mobile home parks at present time. We'll wrap up this year. We've got 2 more closings that will happen before the end of the year. One's a mobile home park and one's a parking asset. And so the fund will have 6 mobile home parks, 1 parking asset in it through the end of this year. Inevitably, we can run this individual fund until the end of next year, so December of 2025, meaning that we can continually raise capital through December 31st, 2025. And then at that point, we'll have to basically make a determination: is there enough deal flow to open up the 5th fund, right? And again, how these things typically goes, we already have momentum with deal flow. We'll have a couple more deals that will end up as seed deals in the next fund. But I mean, that's kind of where we're at. I think that we'll probably end up with somewhere in the realm of 12, 13 properties in this current fund. We're pretty geographically agnostic. However, there's areas that we won't go. New England states we basically stay away from. Your typical, just really concentrated blue states that aren't very landlord friendly. We steer clear of. We do own some stuff in Maryland. That's probably about the only blue state that we own, and we've owned it for a long time. And it's in a red part of the state, so not as bad, but still a little more challenging to operate there. We've owned in New York historically, no longer do. Sold those many years back, and just really focus on the southeast, select areas in the northwest, and then the Midwest has been a really good spot for us. But again, the thing about mobile home parks is there's only, roughly, I don't know, no one knows the exact number, 35,000 mobile home parks across the country, and only a small contingent of those that really probably fit our profile of what we would want to buy. We don't have the ability, like a lot of multifamily guys, to say, hey, we're just going to go buy in Dallas, Texas, or we're just going to go buy in Atlanta, Georgia, right? We kind of got to go
Mhm.
where the opportunities are. So long as they're large enough, if they have enough scale, we'll go to a new market. So for instance, so we've got a park in Ann Arbor, Michigan that we're going to be closing here in the next month or so. We don't own anything in Michigan. We have it in the past, but we don't own anything there now. We have some assets about 4 hours away, so not too far of a distance as far
Mhm.
as like a regional manager is concerned to oversee it. But the community is 500 lots, and so like it's plenty large enough in size to have to be really self-sustainable. It's got enough revenue to basically staff itself and create an economy of scale that we seek. And as far as parking, we end up doing about 1 parking asset a year. We definitely don't transact as many of those. It's hard to find those that check all of our boxes. But ultimately, we look for thriving CBDs in red states and just
So
top tier
CBD
growing markets.
or
Yeah,
business
central business
districts?
districts.
Central
Yep,
business.
yep.
Okay, got it.
But
Got it.
areas that that have made a massive rebound since COVID, that are thriving. Like, for example, we've got one that are closing here in a couple of weeks, and Charlotte, North Carolina, phenomenal market, top tier market. Last year we closed a parking garage in downtown Phoenix, right across from the courthouse. Again, like
Nice.
top tier markets that are just growing like gangbusters. And so
Mhm.
there's not many of those, like CBDs
Yeah.
have taken a big hit. And so there's not a lot of those that are in favorable locales that check all our boxes. And so for that reason, that's why we end up having a lot more mobile home parks in our portfolio than parking. But when we find a great parking asset that's strategically located, almost always on irreplaceable plots of land and just
Mhm.
some of the best areas of town, we don't look at it through a developer's lenses. It's got a standalone today as a cash flowing play. We got to know there's opportunity today to buy it, make great returns on it as a parking garage or a parking lot, whatever it might be, and then know that inevitably, whether it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long it might be, maybe to
Yeah.
where that garage is not relevant anymore, that piece of land that it sits on is going to have a much higher and better use and be worth something much greater as a
Yeah.
redevelopment play. So that's how we look at it. Very long-term vision, but today it makes a lot of sense as parking.
Yeah. I do my investing in Salt Lake City, and 30 years ago, there were a lot of parking lots in Salt Lake City. Now parking lots are getting gobbled up and turned into high rises. So I
That's
see I
right.
see exactly, the allure of that one. You get a parking, and there are a lot of parking garages there now, but I can see exactly that happening in Salt Lake, where 20 years from now, the parking garage may be obsolete now, and take a wrecking ball to it, and then guess what goes up in its place? Another high rise. So I
That's
think
right.
that's a smart play.
Do
Yeah.
yourself a fun exercise. Go on Google Earth. A lot of people they don't know has this functionality, but it's got a historical satellite imagery view where you can slide a
Yes.
scale.
Uh-huh.
Go to Salt Lake, go to a Dallas. I mean, like
It's
go to some
fun.
of those bigger markets and literally go downtown and then go back, however far back it will go, and then
Yeah.
see how different that landscape looks. Service parking lots to just high rises everywhere. It's
Yeah.
insanity.
I remember driving by like a Carl's Jr. in downtown Salt Lake, and this is mid 90s when I was at the University of Utah. And just, it's surrounded by buildings that are, minimum 5 stories tall, and there's just this one standalone Carl's Jr. I'm like, I wonder when that is gonna get gobbled up. And
Yep.
it was there for a long time, and now the tallest building in the state of Utah is on its place. But anyway, well, a couple of questions to finish up. First question, what's next for you?
I love what I do. I love what we've been building over here. I think that we'll stay on the same trajectory. I mean, the fundamentals of what we do haven't changed. I mean, rates have changed. It's been more challenging to raise capital, but generally speaking, what we do hasn't changed. And so, I think for me, it's just looking at it from like what does the next couple of years have in store, or 10 years, what have you. I think continue to grow the company, have fun while we do it. But inevitably, I guess stepping back a little further, the reason why we all do this is to buy back time in our own lives, right? And build something that's sustainable and that's got legs to go the distance. And so I think, that's the biggest priority that myself and my business partner, Brian, have is just really to put the necessary folks in place within the organization, which we've been doing a great job that are much smarter than each one of us, in their own divisions that can basically help us get the company where it's at today to the next couple of levels. And then ultimately allow us to maybe even step even further back, like up in the owner's box and really play that role, whether it be whatever, be a chair seat or something those long lines, but really just build something that can withstand the test of time. I mean, that's really the focus. Keep buying great assets in great markets and make an impact in everyone's lives along the way from our residents. Like I think the affordable housing that we offer is some of the best as far as manufactured housing and the price point in the marketplace, rewarding in that manner, from an employee perspective, just, getting the right folks that enjoy the ride and they're kind of rolling with us and helping us do great things, impacting them and their families' lives. And then, Brian and myself, impacting our family's lives directly and just building a legacy. So,
Speaking of enjoying the ride, I saw that
yeah,
you're doing a long bike ride, Fort Myers to the Keys next week.
it would have been our 14th year. We unfortunately had to cancel about 3 weeks ago. The hurricanes have
Hurricanes?
messed
Okay.
up the roads quite a bit. Down
Mhm.
south where we start, so there's about a 100-mile stretch where the roads are just lots of sand debris, lots of just debris in general, lots of truck traffic moving, debris around, and so just not necessarily safe for riders to be on the road. But yeah, would have been our 14th year. We had to cancel one other year for another hurricane that hit Fort Myers a couple years ago, and then also had to cancel for the first year of COVID.
Yeah.
But it's a great ride. It serves two great causes, and it's typically a lot of fun. So I'm bummed that we couldn't do it, but
Is
we'll
it
get
an
back.
annual ride?
It is an annual ride. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
280 miles over 3 days. We start in Fort Myers Beach, which is here in the west coast of Florida. And then we basically ride 3 days across the Everglades and then end up in Key West at the southernmost point. So I think it's 285
Maybe I'll
miles to be
sign up
exact.
next year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a great, again, great causes, great people that come along, and it's been a fun event that we've now again been doing for 2010 was our first year, so it's been a fun ride.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I do a little bit of cycling, and come November, it's too cold to ride outside too much.
Yeah,
So
we get a lot of folks that come down from the Northeast, or the
Mhm.
Midwest that do the ride every year that are trying to.
Yeah,
You guys are just getting those first couple cold snaps and looking to maybe get a little reprieve, and you're still in
yeah.
good cycling shape, from the summer and the fall. So
Well, that's what the Peloton's for. I've got the
yeah,
Peloton in the next room over, and that keeps me in decent shape over the winter, but it's not nearly as fun as getting outside and getting around.
yeah.
But
I wish I would have fallen in love with the Peloton. I've got one,
Mhm.
and just I tried many years, and I still have it, and I still have the subscription, but it's just not the same for me. I struggle with it.
Oh, it's definitely not the same, but kind of made it my own little rule where there's like Netflix series that I want to binge watch, and the Peloton lets you bring in Netflix, and so you can ride while watching Netflix. So that's one way that I get it done. But yeah, that, and it gets so cold here in the winter. I'm in Idaho Falls, but it gets so cold here in the winter time that there's weeks and months that you don't want to do anything outside. So you kind of
That's
have
right.
to learn how to do.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
so annual event, looks like 280 miles. All right. I might just do that next year. That
We'd
sounds like
love to have you.
so. All right. Next question. What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting to get into commercial real estate?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of information out there now that didn't exist, at least way back when I got started. You had to dig a lot deeper. I
Mhm.
think that's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it's out there. You got the bad thing is you got to sift through a lot of it now because there's so much of it, right? It can be overwhelming. But I think just, trying to identify if you're getting started, whether it's whatever it might be, there's multiple different ways to make money in real estate. It really comes down to like what vehicle is going to be the best suited for you and, help you achieve your goals. I think choosing that first, like really, researching what the options are, if it's multifamily, mobile home parks, whatever it might be, there's no right or wrong. Finding that
Mhm.
right vehicle and then aligning yourself with someone like yourself in multifamily or someone like us in mobile home parks, trying to align yourself with somebody that's already doing it. It's got a little bit of a track record that's, had some bruises and hopefully maybe can help you avoid those same bruises. Right. And in whatever capacity, whether it's you work for them, maybe there's a mentorship program, something along those lines, but like there's information to be had out there. You just want to make sure that you get it from the right person. You want to get it from the right source. Because there's surely a lot of folks that might maybe not on purpose mislead you or take you down the wrong path, but just don't have the battle scars. They haven't been doing it long enough to have seen everything, right? To have been through all the ups and downs and guide you appropriately. So again,
Yeah.
but the information is out there. It's now, your responsibility to get out there and absorb it and take the time to learn it.
All right. Last question. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah. So, from a company perspective, if you want to learn about what we're doing in the mobile home park and parking space, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. Got a lot of great information there, as well as, current offerings. We also put up, pretty transparent about deals we do. We'll put up appraisals, third party reports, case studies on things that we've gone full cycle on. So
Mhm.
there's a good bit that can be learned there. You can also reach out to me on my website, kevinbupp.com. There I host my Real Estate Investing for Cashflow podcast, and you can listen to all the episodes there. And either one of those, if you go to the contact us page, one way or another, it will make it back to me in one form or fashion.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you guys are interested in reaching out to him, I'll put all those links in the show notes. Also throw a link do you use the same link for your ride every year? Because I was looking at that route.
Yep.
Okay, I'll throw
Yep.
that in the show notes more for me so I know where to find it, 8 months from now. So awesome. Well, hey, Kevin, thanks for coming on the show. Very much appreciate your time today.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me, man. It's been a lot of fun.